this one or this one? Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Renee Sieber. I'm at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec. Bonjour. I research meaningful participation in AI, which sometimes means citizen control over AI. I'm joined by Kito Shilongo. Kito's in Namibia and tried to join us in person, but was unable to, but she's online. Kito is a tech policy practitioner whose work is supported by the Mozilla Foundation, and she's also a fellow at Connected by Data. Welcome to the resistance. Some AI cannot be rehabilitated. It must be resisted. Many people in the world have legitimate reasons to distrust AI. Therefore, some AI should never be trusted. How can or do we make resistance not a negative and include it in debate, discussion, and the future of AI? How can we enable the public, workers, unhoused people, and refugees, targeted groups to shape AI and in some cases stop some or all of AI in its tracks? Resistance includes the data collected or harvested, the algorithms trained, the systems developed, the big firms and professional associations' concentration of power, as well as the technology implemented. How can we make no a possible option in the public and private sectors? Today, you're going to hear resistance in various forms, counter-governance, care for workers, and finally making AI safe for democracy. One caveat, we are aware that resistance is perceived as a privilege for those in developed countries. However, we would like to think that resistance is a resource used in various forms by communities less privileged and for whom AI is presented as the saving grace. We hope the work here today will begin to map the many ways these communities are resisting and exercising their agency. And just a note that we have a Rise Up notepad that's part of the agenda that you can add your comments to. And with that, our first panel item.
That's a good thing.
Thank you, Renee, for that introduction. So, hello, everyone. I'm Anna Brandusescu, together with my colleagues Blair Attard-Frost, David Gray-Witter, and Christelle Tassono. We've been working on a project looking at different cases of collective resistance against state-led and industry-led AI governance initiatives. Originally, I was going to co-present with Blair, but unfortunately, she had her flight canceled, so she couldn't make it. So I'll be presenting on behalf of all of us, and David will join me for questions. So today we'd like to share with you one of those cases. This is the story of how Canada failed to pass an ineffective and undemocratic piece of AI legislation due to intense public backlash and collective resistance. Canada has a structural problem with industry power and public participation in AI governance. In a recent study, Blair and I, along with her doctoral supervisor, Kelly Leon, analyzed documentations from 84 federal and provincial AI governance initiatives in Canada, where we found some concerning trends. These initiatives strongly prioritize industry's production and adoption of AI technologies over other issues. There are large programs and policy initiatives often include targeted engagements with industry stakeholders with little or no public consultation involved. And communities and workers impacted by the adoption of AI technologies are often pushed to the margins of these initiatives. So a question emerged for us and for many others working in the Canadian AI policy space. How can we oppose AI governance if it emerges from political, economic, and legal regimes that fail to include marginalized communities and workers? Our thinking about that question is shaped by this paper by Ricky John Dean on the notion of counter-governance. Dean conceptualizes counter-governance as a process of citizen opposition or contestation constituted with a direct and formal relation to power. These processes emerge in response to a state actor's failure to meaningfully include the public in governance and can involve many types of practices such as collective organizing, civic oversight of government decision-making, petitions, media engagement, and community-led audits to investigate and raise awareness of policy failures. So Blair applied that concept of counter-governance to write an essay titled AI Counter-Governance. The essay outlines a toolkit for communities and workers to resist industry and state power if their AI governance initiatives do not serve their interests. In the essay, she looks at 4 cases of community and worker-led resistance against AI governance. One of those 4 cases is the case of Canada's Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, also known as ADA, a piece of proposed AI legislation that received intense public backlash throughout its entire life in Parliament. ADA was first tabled in Parliament in 2022 and aimed to establish a regulatory framework for AI in Canada with 3 pillars. 1, the regulation of high-impact systems, comparable to EU AI Act's high-risk systems. The second was the creation of a new regulatory authority known as the AI and Data Commissioner, who would assist the minister responsible for ADA in enforcing the act, and the creation of a new administrative monetary penalties and criminal offenses for contravening ADA. During its life in Parliament, ADA was hotly debated by members of Parliament, as well as an in-depth study by the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Voiced criticisms of ADA were many. ADA lacked public consultation in drafting the legislation, despite records provided by the government showing there were no extensive engagement with industry stakeholders and no ongoing consultation requirements built into the text of the legislation. ADA had limited scope that mostly applied to harms to individuals and commercial entities, which was about minimizing the importance of collective harms and environmental harms, and did not apply to government institutions, so it's just private sector only. ADA lacked specificity, with unclear definitions of key terms like high-impact systems and harms. ADA had a skewed power structure. The AI and Data Commissioner would not have been independent from government and could only order audits after a contravention would have been reported. And ADA created barriers and burdens, especially for recourse and justice for harmed individuals and groups. So advocacy organizations, unions, and policy researchers, ourselves included, resisted this legislation in several ways. We organized open letters to members of Parliament. We submitted briefs to the parliamentary committee studying the legislation and appeared before the committee as witnesses to offer testimony about ADA's flaws. We advanced alternative policy proposals for extensive amendments for ADA or for entirely different policy visions for Canadian AI regulation. We engage in public audits and evaluations of ADA and its legislative process to hold the government to account for its failures. And we also engage with journalists and the general public to raise awareness about the impact of AI on Canadians, as well as the existence of this legislation. So we wanted to share with you 3 briefs we submitted specifically to the committee. The first on the left was co-authored by Christelle and focused on ADA as lacking proper oversight, accountability mechanisms, and human rights protections. The second in the middle was submitted by Blair and focused on the lack of protection for the creative industry and artists available in ADA. And the third on the right, I co-authored with my doctoral supervisor, Renee Sieber, who is with us today, which highlights ADA's missed opportunity for shared prosperity regarding workers' protection, public consultation, and accountability. So we've learned 3 lessons from Canada's national AI policy failure. These lessons can be applied to oppose unaccountable state-led AI governance around the world. So lesson 1, successful AI counter-governance emerges from strong interpersonal relationships and ad hoc coalitions. This moment is about learning from spaces and movements outside of tech policy. It's about getting to know how others have organized and continue to organize. We can look to the Tech Won't Build Coalition in the US, which David can tell us more about. We can learn from the organizing we do in our local communities, like the latest Boycott Amazon campaign in Quebec, or the ongoing student organizing for Palestinian liberation against military and surveillance AI. We can encourage public servants to speak up about AI harms anonymously by creating trust and support networks for them. And we can reach out to professional associations like the Canadian Labour Congress to see how they approach issues with AI and find out how we can help. Lesson 2. Localized governance initiatives are more concrete. They allow workplaces, organizations, and communities to build resources and power to determine if, when, and how AI should be adopted within specific contexts. We can learn from Sidewalk Labs in saying no to physical instances of big tech power and how the people of Toronto rejected the Google Alphabet takeover over their city. We can also learn to say no to AI in campaigns against tools like predictive analytics and reject their use by HR departments in hiring processes. We equally can reject the use of facial recognition by law enforcement or for filling our taxes or receiving an unemployment check. And last lesson, lesson 3. AI awareness and education should come from the bottom up. Communities can build knowledge of AI impacts and it can be regulated by them as well. This is our chance to push back against the status quo of AI literacy campaigns. We can focus on critical thinking literacy and question decisions made by those in power. We can encourage and support a discourse of not being afraid to ask why and to ask why in groups. We can decide what kind of campaigns are needed to make labor more inclusive, to protect everyone in the workforce, and actively link that protection to race and gender. To wrap it up, top-down AI governance by state and industry leaders does not always serve the public interest. Collective resistance steps in when AI governance fails to serve the public interest, and researchers, practitioners, and organizers can learn from those acts of resistance. Thank you.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Fine.
It's just here. Okay.
Cool.
I'll go through the, yeah, we can do that. Okay, I'm told I have 10 minutes and I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to get started and go through things a little bit fast. I also work at Partnership on AI, so I'll skip over the About PAI section because my far more eloquent colleague Tina already covered most of this. But just to reiterate the important parts, we are a multi-stakeholder organization that brings together civil society, academia, and industry, and increasingly are engaging with policymakers as well. I'm going to talk about one specific area today. This touches on a lot of different things, but high quality AI models, I think everyone knows, require a lot of training data. What we don't often talk about is what it takes to make that data legible to algorithmic systems. There are hundreds of millions of people across the world who are involved in making sure that data is actually usable to train AI models. And there needs to be more attention to the conditions under which these data sets are constructed and who constructs them. And there are a lot of different reasons for this, and we can get into some of them, but maybe not all of them today. But a lot of research has already highlighted the conditions under which this work is being done right now, and I would refer you to some of the great research on this topic. I think some people might be in this room, but there's a lot that's been covered on what these people are facing because they're not always considered workers. But today I want to focus a lot more on what we can be doing better to improve conditions for data enrichment workers and what that pathway really looks like. To come back to why this is important, there are a couple of reasons. There are 4 on the slides. There's more in secret afterwards if you want to come find me. But one is responsible AI should cover both the development and deployment of AI. Very often in these conversations, we focus on when the AI model is already deployed. And I have a long tangent that cannot happen right now around what happens when we lose that. But if we don't understand the underlying data infrastructure and what it takes to actually train these models and embed human values into it, we lose a lot. And I think we should question whether or not these models are actually capable of what we think they are capable of. And that starts with looking at the underlying data. The second is that this is an opportunity to build a more inclusive economy around AI that works for society. This is a new job that is being created where a lot of people are actually involved in shaping these models. And they are sometimes paid pennies and sometimes not paid at all. And this isn't necessarily considered work. But this is a new job, and we should be making sure that there are adequate protections and structures in place to making sure that these people are set up for success to do a good job. The third is that the demand for this type of work is actually increasing. Oftentimes we have this idea that this type of work is just temporary and it's going to go away. But as we're seeing models get more complex and being used in more specialized use cases, we're actually seeing an increase in demand for more expertise to train these models to do more complex things. So this means that there's a higher demand for quantum physicists to be doing data enrichment work and red teaming and evaluation of these models to make sure they're safe, which leads me to the fourth point, that this is actually critical to make sure that our models are actually safe. So the conditions under which data workers are doing this work can shape the resulting model. So if you put in really high productivity targets for workers to review, for instance, 20 medical charts in an hour that are thousands of pages, that's not setting them up for success. And it also has implications for the resulting model and when it can be used safely. So how do we solve this? Why is this problem happening? When we started looking at this work, part of the problem was that it was no one's job to focus on this within these companies. It was kind of falling through the cracks. We knew who the decision makers were, kind of. We knew that there were decisions being made and we knew the impacts that were resulting. But we didn't really have a good sense of who was responsible for changing these decisions and where the responsibility lied. And that meant that it was really hard to figure out who to go to. So starting with that, a complex supply chain that's global and a lot of different organizations across the value chain are shaping the actual implications for workers leads to a problem that is hard to solve. And I think starting with a fundamental hypothesis that there are practices that are not currently happening, but the industry can adopt to improve conditions for data enrichment workers. The way we approach this is that we've started with scoping conversations to figure out, well, is there appetite to engage on this? So we convened in 2020 in a 5-part workshop series with civil society, academia, industry to figure out what the industry could be doing better. The actual practices that need to exist weren't really controversial, but what was controversial was how do you actually get this adopted? And so that's what I'll mostly be focusing on today. We took the findings from research and also those that 5-part workshop series, published a white paper in 2021 that highlighted what the industry should aim for. It was a 40-page white paper. And I'm coming from industry as a product manager, and I knew that there was no one sitting at any of these companies who was looking at how do I operationalize 40 pages of theoretical materials? And so that led to a problem. What does it actually take to put these into practice? And so I think it was extremely important to start focusing on what does this look like in an applied setting. We were looking to partner with a couple of different companies. It was really hard. We can get into that later. But we found a company that was thinking about this in a very similar way because they had more of a research background and had gone through IRB approval processes. And we found 2 change makers within this company who were really motivated to try to understand what would it take to actually adapt their existing infrastructure to also cover data enrichment workers, which is different from data subjects or data participants in the types of protections that are needed. That implementation was really effective and it resulted in a case study. And we spent about 6 months, about a year, kind of figuring out what it looks like in practice and also then looking at what the impact was and revisited how this was being implemented in practice. That resulted in translating the 40-page white paper into a 2-pager, set of 5 guidelines, and a couple of other resources that helped meet those guidelines more consistently. I'll note this is all on our website. All the resources are there, but also importantly, there was a governance mechanism. There was an internal ethics review process. So every single team that was setting up a data enrichment project had to set out an application as to how they were meeting the guidelines, which was reviewed by the responsible development and innovation team. But then it was like, how do we get more companies to also do this, who look different, have different organizational structures and different opinions about how this happens in practice? And so we brought together more companies in a workshop in 2023 to understand, well, what would it take for all of you to do something similar? And that resulted in 3 themes that helped set out an agenda for later. One was that this was not a single node problem. It wasn't just the companies that were responsible for shaping the conditions of data enrichment workers. There were vendors. There was a procurement process that also meant that more actors were shaping the condition of data enrichment workers. And unless there was alignment between those actors, it was going to be really difficult to actually make sure that people were meeting these guidelines in a consistent way in these complex organizations dealing with other complex organizations. The second was that you needed more transparency and accountability. It's not enough to say, we are doing the guidelines. There needs to be a transparency and accountability mechanism, which we'll get into. Third is that this would be, because there wasn't a already like a normal function to focus on these things, changing these organizations to prioritize it would be more efficient and possible if this was seen as an industry-wide initiative. So we'll skip over a few things because I have 2 minutes left. But we had a community of practice meeting regularly, which was with these organizations and figuring out how to address some of those themes that came up. And since then, since that sort of experimentation and testing phase, we've expanded what we've been doing and trying to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. We've been engaging more with labor advocates and unions and also with policymakers. We had a workshop in 2024 that brought together different actors across the supply chain to stop pointing the finger at each other and start working together. We refined additional resources. What it comes down to, what we're asking companies to do is 5 things at the moment. One is do the guidelines. These are agreed on by the researchers that have been working on this for a really long time, and it's not new. The second was there needs to be some sort of internal governance mechanism for companies to be able to ensure that there's consistency within organizations because decision-making is really distributed. The third is look outside of your organization. What are you doing to make sure that your downstream actors are also aligned with what you are, what guidelines you are trying to meet. The fourth was publishing transparency reports that'll enable accountability. We haven't specified where those transparency reports should exist. So for larger companies that have existing practices of ESG reports or supply chain transparency reports or other types of reports. Maybe it makes sense to put it there. For other smaller companies that don't have traditional supply chains, maybe it makes sense to put into a model card. But the important part was we need more transparency around this. And the fifth was we need to integrate workers' voices to directly iterate these practices, because I can point out, I could probably write a 10-page paper right now about how the guidelines I published are insufficient and outdated already. What does it look like to adapt these recommendations, though? Needs to pull in the perspective of people on the ground. And so there needs to be a process for pulling in that perspective and creating worker co-governance. This is not the end goal. This is to enable greater accountability, but we're trying to figure out what companies can do to enable that ecosystem from their end as well and start tracking some of this information. Notably, we have 2 more guidelines, 2 more resources that we put out, and they are aligned with some of the human rights due diligence practices and frameworks there. And if you want to comment on them, they are on the website. Thank you.
Keep this rolling.
Okay. Is it working? Yes. Sorry. Hello. So I'm so proud to be on this panel. Resistance is really what we need right now, and not only on the AI front. I'm David Maas. I'm the Chief AI Officer at Make.org. And with Clarie, we will present you a research program called the Democratic Common. And we'll explain you why we started this research program and what we try to achieve with it. So, of course, when generative arrived in the world, we were working on democracy, and as democracy practitioner, the first reaction was to be afraid, right? Because there are already so many bad things happening on the democratic front, on social network in particular, and with AI and generative AI, it could only get worse. So our first reaction was a reaction of threat and of protection, and we have a lot of examples in mind. You have seen what happened in Slovakia, in Romania, in the US. And we have a program that is actually addressing these issues. But our second reaction was, wait, we should not only protect from what's happening with AI, maybe AI is an opportunity too. Because we believe that resistance is not only protecting ourselves against the harm of generative AI, but it's also empowering the citizens to actually resist and have their voice on the governance of AI. And so our second reaction when we saw generative arrive in the world was, wait, it might also be a huge opportunity for democracy and for giving citizens power to actually shape the future of AI and shape the future of any policy, actually. What are these power that we see for the citizens? The first power that we see is every issue that we have, AI, climate change, are complex issues. And it's complex for citizens to get involved in these issues. But AI has the power to synthesize information. So suddenly, all the reports you have online, all the lengthy video you have, they explaining everything to you, but nobody reads, nobody watch. You can put them into AI and then ask questions to AI and have simple questions, synthetic questions to understand the issue. So suddenly we can have more informed citizens, and that's the first step to be able to have an opinion and voice your opinion. The second thing is, once you are informed, maybe you want to voice your concern. You want to give your opinion about how to shape AI, or what is the direction that AI should go. What should AI do? What should not AI do? And if you want to do so and you want to express your ideas, we are not equal when we try to express our ideas. So maybe we can use AI assistant to actually help you express your idea better. That's a second superpower we can give to citizens. And there is a third thing that we can do. You have seen many examples of citizen assembly. We love when people discuss together. We think it's very powerful, especially to bridge amongst people who have different opinions instead of polarizing them and separating them. But often we need human facilitator to do so. What if, now that we have conversational AI, we use AI to actually facilitate discussion between humans? And this is another superpower. We can try to do. And the fourth one is AI is now providing a free translation. So we can have in multilingual debates. We are a European company. We run operation at the European level. Suddenly you can have people discussing across Europe in their own language and understand each other. So that's very powerful. And we want to take this power, leverage them, build platforms that leverage this power to give voice to citizens. And we want to apply them to many topics, including the governance of AI. And we already do. We have two examples for leading to the summit on AI. We had a consultation on AI. We had 11,000 participants online that explain what they want for AI. They express the need for regulation for AI, fear for AI, but also hopes. They want to use AI for health. They want to use AI to solve natural crises. And there is a controversy, but some people want to use it for democracy and some are afraid of it. And we also have a second initiative. We have listed 100 initiatives that we are working on AI and democracy, and we'll use AI, this ability of summarizing information, to actually explore all these initiatives online. It will be revealed on Monday, so follow us on LinkedIn and you will have a link. But when you use AI for all this, are we right to do so? Isn't it dangerous? This is why it's a controversy in our consultation, because we know that AI has bias. That can we trust AI to summarize debate? Will you trust DeepSeek to summarize the debate on Taiwan? Will you trust Grok to have to summarize the debate on social networks? But can we trust also Anthropic? Can we trust ChatGPT? Can we trust Gemini if we use it for facilitating our democratic debate and for helping us raise our voices? And we know there are a lot of bias in AI. We have AI that can have political opinions. We can have AI that would discriminate some population. We can have AI that favorize sentence ID over other. And so what we want to do is we build platform, we put AI on it, we'll generate a lot of data, and we will provide all this data to research people, so to sociologists and to AI scientists. Clarie will talk about it. And they will crunch this data, work on this to try and evaluate the bias of AI when we use it for democracy and try to correct it. And how we do so, I will give the floor to Clarie.
Thank you. So I will now explain a bit more how to address these questions, how to address the democratic biases of LLMs. So we built a coalition composed of social science researchers as well as data science researchers. And we are also at make.org practitioners, democracy practitioners. So it's a mix between participation practitioners as well as academia. The idea is to have research fed with real data from make.org platforms. And to do so, we build this coalition from make.org practitioners. We're also teamed up with researchers from Sciences Po, from CEVIPOF, Bernard Hubert, who is here, as well as Jean-Philippe Contet from Media Lab, so CEVIPOF and Media Lab research centers, as well as data science experts. For example, François Yvon, who is known to work on, who has worked on the open source LLM Bloom, as well as Gaël Lejeune and Benjamin Piwowarski, to review our outputs and to make sure this is not only France-focused, but also that our results can be applied at the international context. We have a scientific supervisory board composed of members such as Audrey Tang, the former Digital Affairs Minister of Taiwan, as well as democracy experts such as Helen Longmore from Yale or Yoshail Benkler from the Berkman Klein Center, and other experts. And we have also partners which have endorsed our program, key AI experts giving us academic and technical support, such as Hugging Face, Mozilla AI, Aspen Institute, Project Liberty, AI in Society Institute, and we are funded by BPI France. Hugging Face, for example, will help us create a benchmark to allow us to score the level of compatibility of any LLMs with democratic principles. So to give you a bit more concrete idea of what we're going to build, we are going to build 4 democratic commons. The first step, which is going to be done as a collective effort, but mostly by Bernard Hubert, is to determine the democratic principles applied for AI. The second step is going to identify and measure democratic biases from this conceptual framework that is going to be produced. And then the data science experts, researchers from Sorbonne will help us develop democratic bias evaluation tool and correction tools. From there, we will be able to have open source safe for democracy LLMs. And on the practitioner side, on make.org side, we will develop open source participatory platforms. The idea here is to make sure that AI can improve participation in AI governance with the AI consultation that David mentioned, for example, and to make sure that through this program, we are building a safe for democracy AI, safe to enhance citizen participation, and that we are also creating open source commons, open for everyone to comment and open for collaborations, research collaborations. I think, yeah, I was very quick to make sure we have more time for questions.
So come on up.
So hopefully we've been sufficiently provocative that there will be questions. Well, come on over.
And then we can.
Where should they go? Tim?
So much. Good morning, and thank you for your papers. My question is for Clarie. And- Okay, hi Clarie. I'm Susan Aronson from GW University. And I was just talking to Stefan about this. What troubles me about what you're trying to do, and perhaps you didn't identify this in the paradigm, is that really the people who care are the people who are here, times 10. And how do you get average people who, may vote, but in general are not motivated to participate in your commons so you really have a representative sample? Because it is troubling to me that we are proceeding with participatory approaches, which are not by definition really participatory. But how you get there, I don't know.
Maybe I will answer that because yeah, thank you, Susan, for the question. It's a real issue that when you design participatory platform, usually people think to complex functionalities that are very wonderful, but nobody use them. What we do at Med.org, we try to design platforms that are fit to actually engage low engaged citizens. So what we do, we design the platform to work with, to be compatible with campaigns on social networks. So we go and reach out to people on Meta, reach out to people on Twitter, and we try to engage them with the topic of a conversation. Hey, do you know that they plan to use AI to I don't know, for military action? Do you want to do so? If not, come and voice your opinion. And when they arrive on the platform, we try to design a very simple experience that is akin to what they have on social networks, so that without any explanation, they understand that they should vote or don't vote certain proposal. Then after seeing a few propositions from other citizens, they can make their own. There we will add an AI that helps you write a better proposal so that the other citizen can understand what you want to propose. And so it's very important that we design experiments that are meant to have people. And just one number, when we run an operation in France, typically or nationally in Germany, we have or usually 100,000 people participating. At the European level, we are able to go over 1 million. So we really reach out to people who never usually show up to an open meeting, or even don't go spontaneously to an online platform or look even for a participatory process online. We reach out to them and we make sure that they actually can engage with the platform.
Une autre question?
Hello. My question is about what tools do we really have to resist? What are the checks and the balances? Because in AI, they are already developing to the extent that they will be releasing self-operating weapons in the coming weeks. But as a civil society, what are the real deterrents that we have, especially that there's money and governments behind the other side?
Hello. I'm just curious, who here teaches students? Yeah, we can think about perhaps how we teach our students about what kind of work we want to do when they graduate, thinking about where it's cool to work and where it's not. We can think of meta. We can think about what we protest outside of, and we can think of ways to try and change public perceptions around the role that companies play in genocides and wars abroad. I also think I think what our work is trying to do is examine, I mean, as scholars such as, Meg Young, who I know somewhere's here, Renee, Suresh, others studying participation have pointed out that when the terms of participation are set by people that I certainly don't trust, but I think that other people not like me who have faced greater marginalization have certain even more reason not to trust that the sort of frame of participation is one that needs critique. And I think from that opens up a broader set of opportunities for resistance, including those I've mentioned. Yeah, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. So one is just personal. I think the tools that we need is like courage, individual and together, because we're in like a new world order, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not. And yeah, you're right. It's going to, now we're just tightening borders, national security, more AI for defense, blah, blah, blah. But then what do we do, right? So I want to go back to Tech Won't Build It, because they started this work back in 2017, 2018. So we can really learn from organizers in tech who refuse to build certain AI and start normalizing that in our culture of talking about AI. So really having we shouldn't use it sometimes, and make it that not be a sideline. And yeah, I just want to go back to courage. And again, as I think we mentioned, looking at other actual on the ground resistance organizing that have nothing to do with technology and AI, because then you can really get to know what people are, what they care about, what their tactics are, what tools they have. And I don't have it with me, it's in my bag, but I really recommend Mutual Aid, the book by Dave Spade, written in 2020. It's a really good intro to not feeling like hopeless in this moment.
And I would add too that not all AI is generative AI. Most AI in the world is still classificatory systems. And there are software libraries out there. Of course, not everyone's going to be able to do it, but there are software libraries in R and Python that people can use. And also civil society in Canada shut down the policy, the AI policy in Canada.
Sorry, I have a question about the use of AI on participatory platforms, or as you presented in case of deliberative democracy. Like one risk that AI possesses, for example, you mentioned that you have deployed and gathered around 11,000 participants with respect to this Participatory AI Action Summit in Paris. They have deliberated on, have provided recommendation. Like the problem within this process is like how you go from aggregate to disaggregate, or come from disaggregate to aggregate. And when you want to summarize, whose points of views are get ignored and whose points of view are get represented. Did you guys consider this as, what were the choices? Like in math, we have the social choice theory, which deals with this extensively. But to what extent you guys were dealing with this? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question. And I'm not sure the answer is mathematical. So of course, there is a social choice theory. You have many ways of summarizing things. Now with generative AI, we have a new way of summarizing things, trust the AI. And actually, there are system, Jigsaw is deploying a sense-making solution to actually aggregate users' opinion. What we are trying to do, that's why we have a multidisciplinary approach. So we are trying to devise what should be careful when we design such program, what are the principles that should apply when we design a program to summarize ideas, to what extent should we take into account minority opinions and majority, or should we represent what is majority, what is minority, and the weight of each opinion in the debate. These are open questions, and we are trying to, by this pluridisciplinary approach, to match what we can do technically and what we should do theoretically. And it's still a journey, it's an open journey. You are welcome to contribute. And we are trying to do our best actually to not to marginalize people. But one thing I mention is you need to summarize, because if you don't summarize, it's lost anyway. So we are humans. We have a limited cognitive capacity. We can only handle 6 to 7 items in our mind. So any summaries about 6 or 7 items and which 6 or 7 items you keep is the big questions. We try to do our best.
We have other questions in the room. Keep your hand raised. Who was that? There we go.
Good morning. My name is Shaz Jameson. Thank you so much for this panel. I have a question for Sonam. You're creating new governance, and you spoke about how difficult it was to create new partnerships in an area that there were no partnerships before. If you feel comfortable, I would love to hear how that went and what strategies you found useful for shifting those perspectives. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, this is also like everything, maybe a longer conversation. But I think for when I was approaching this, I think I was thinking about like kind of me as a user, because I was at a company where I was like, oh, like this is a big gap, but it's not anyone's job. It's not a priority. It's no one's responsibility. So you can kind of have, I mean, and we've been talking to labor advocates and unions and folks who are passionate about this, but there's no one at the company for them to go talk to. That was where we were starting. There was no one that you could even say, hey, stop doing this thing, right? Because it was that much of like not on the radar. And so there was a lot of like field building that had to happen as a result, and circulation. And I think there were a few places where we got a little bit lucky as well, right? So when right after the white paper, I had asked a lot of different companies at different stages or scales if they would be willing to implement this. And it was like, there are some companies where I went to like 7 different departments, and everyone would be sympathetic of like, this is a big problem. Like I'm seeing the news articles and this is important. But like when you have a bunch of other priorities and KPIs that you're actually being measured against, taking on something new is actually really hard. And so we got lucky that we found, and I think I make the distinction often between within companies between decision makers and champions or change makers. And so finding people who are sympathetic internally and can push where they can and setting up their organizations when it becomes a priority to be there. And that's part of like the broader theory of change of we've been working with some of these champions internally at these companies to build out, well, what needs to be happening. And there was some convincing and, different stages of companies had different fears and considerations. And there's all, some fear around like acknowledging that there's a lot of human labor to build AI, which makes you look less like an AI company maybe. And so I think thinking creatively, I guess, about who can be targeted. And so the approach that I've kind of taken is how do we set people up internally? And like the first case study that we did with DeepMind was really it was a little bit lucky. We can talk about that and like the amount of conversations it took to get this prioritized. But the big thing afterwards was companies were emailing me, or like other people, champions within other companies were emailing me saying, oh, now we can use this to make the case internally. Like that was a powerful example of like, I see this being prioritized by another major company, and now I can make a stronger case. And so it's a little bit of that and a little bit of like positioning people, and then kind of taking a longer term view as well of what needs to happen in order to set the dialogue. So I think we're kind of in a position now where there are people to talk to at these companies who have been thinking about it. And once it's been prioritized, there's like a history of internal champions who've been setting out like the infrastructure of what needs to happen.
Fantastic. And we've got one last quick fire question from online, so we can maybe get all panelists to give their 20-second version of this. And the question was quite simple. Is all resistance good resistance?
Well, it's for us. I really don't know. No, I think that what I said is our approach. So when you see bad things happening, it's the natural feeling is, how can we prevent that harm? But I think that we should also have we should both fight in defense and attack. So we should try to limit the harm, but we should also not reject AI, but try to leverage it for good. So that's what we are trying to do at least. And that's, I think, a good mindset. Try not only to protect from the bad thing happening, but try also to create the new good things that can overcome the bad ones.
I have my favorite ways of resisting, but I'm also loath to condemn methods of resistance that are chosen by folks that don't feel they have other options in face of these large AI systems that gobble up their data and such. So I think that, yeah, I think a little bit more open-mindedness about what constitutes resistance and good resistance there would be really good.
I saw good resistance and I thought like good governance, good AI. So are we just turning resistance into good as opposed to bad resistance? And I don't have an answer for you, but I think it should just be resistance as in what are we resisting for rather than a catch-all. Is this all good or there's some bads? And then we find loopholes on that because we don't really have time to waste. We should organize.
And finally, yes, there is bad resistance. Yes, there is dark participation, but we all carry our biases. We all make decisions about what's good and bad. And I think we cannot remain neutral in the face of these technologies. And we have to take a position. And hopefully we've convened with others to find a position that is amenable.